All right, so it's a little unusual for me to one use a microphone and stand still. I've been trained not to. I have an active 7-year-old boy, and he keeps me on my toes. So I'm going to try to stay in one spot and not over talk into the microphone. I've never been accused of not being heard, especially by him. So today I was asked to discuss stormwater, and it's something that our office has dealt with since I started with the district almost 30 years ago. Um, it's an interesting concept, and something that I've learned through the years is that when you're working in nature, whether you want to accept it or not, everything is a system. And I usually say everything comes back to physics, but that's things that I kind of look at it. So when we're looking at stormwater and stormwater runoff, it's not just it's not just the water we're concerned with for a couple of reasons, but it's also materials. And this slide right here, this is actually not in the Lake George watershed, but this happens in the Lake George watershed. It happens in the Schroon Lake watershed. It happens in the Upper Hudson watershed. It happens everywhere. This was actually, if anybody's down in the Glens Falls area, this is years ago down in Coles Woods. This occurred, and it's because a valve was left open on the water tank when they were flushing it, the big water tank, and that's what happens. It's the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and you have to watch out for that. But what is stormwater? So stormwater, the simplest definition for stormwater runoff, and I like to say that a stormwater runoff is water that doesn't infiltrate into the ground. That water is going to flow somewhere or infiltrate. There is no other option at that point. If it stands still for a long enough period of time, it could be taken up by plants and transpired off. It could evaporate off, but it's kind of constantly moving one way or the other. Stormwater itself isn't inherently problematic. It's what formed the world. And erosion is a natural process also. Cuts and fills. Streams erode every second of every minute of every day for our lives. We generally don't have as much of a problem with stream erosion on a lot of our streams because honestly, we don't live in a long enough period of time to recognize that there's a problem. Only after there's a significant storm event, such as up in the Ausable. Is anybody from Hague here? You folks have experienced some pretty significant storm events in the last 10 years that have altered stream paths. That's where you start having a lot of people recognizing that maybe stormwater and erosion are issues. But what's in there, we're looking at, litter, sediment, pesticides, fertilizers, animal waste. So you're looking at dogs, basically, and chemicals from autos off of the road. So when we have that, but then you have other events that are beyond our control. Okay. This is from the Western fires last year. You can see the sun up there. I took that picture. And we're impacted what goes on. Have a car are elements that plants need to, just like Friday night, should you have one or two sarsaparillas, or do you want four or five? It's not good for us to have too much of any one thing. So when our plants start feeding on more phosphorus when we're in water, we're going to have problematic issues, and it causes issues not just beyond having vegetation, but changing how the water flows in our streams, warming of the water, and things of that. And then you have the other items, which I'll leave to Phil and Chris to, if they want to talk about. I'm not a chemist, so the volatile organic compounds and basically anything that ends in ENE that you read about. So I had to look that up. It had to be true. It was on Wikipedia. So, and here's an example of kind of actually going back to what Phil said. We are responsible for what's going on out there. Why? Because we drove up Pilot Knob Road to come here, and we parked in a parking lot. And even gravel parking lots over time become compacted, and they reduce or eliminate the availability for water to infiltrate. The DEC recognizes that, and actually a gravel driveway is considered an impervious surface because of constant compaction. You have water applied to soil or small stone or material where It's a combination. You apply pressure, time, water. It just builds up, and you make a compacted layer. People who tear up big box stores, parking lots, the soil underneath the parking lot that's been sitting there for 20 years is probably not any better for infiltration than the parking lot itself. And I would argue you're better off leaving the macadam on there because you're not going to have erosion from the macadam. So it's something you have to kind of get your head around and evaluate, pros and cons of the whole thing. We are seeing a lot of changes, and we see because of our types of rainfall that we have. But what influences stormwater runoff? Well, our drainage area. So when we're looking at, let's say that you're concerned about a driveway, your house, you're looking at a small drainage area potentially, but what is the topography? How much of it is impervious? We have a grant to do some work in the city of Glens Falls. Ultimately, the water flows over to Sanford Street by the BOCES school, and it's 114 acres of watershed, and 95% of it is impervious. Completely different than up here, in a lot of places. So we have to deal with those differently. Storage, wetlands, ponds, other lakes, how much is held back? Again, our type of rainfall events. Our 100-year storm, or what's termed for the general public is a 100-year storm, which is a 1% chance of that type of storm occurring at any given point in the year. You can have 2 of them in a week, 3 of them in a week, 4 in a week. You get to 3 or 4, those are very good odds that you go, wager with, So when you have that 100-year storm and you're in our county, doing some comparisons of data from 1990 to today, different data sources, it was USDA and now Cornell, we have an average increase over a 24-hour storm, which is kind of plotted for engineering purposes. And that's that 1 out of 100 event. We have an increase somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch of rain. Or there's a broader range too. It could be a little lower, but it could also be 1.5 inches more. So you're dealing with a lot of uncertainties. And the big changes, as we have more water, as we have more development, as we have an alteration from the natural landscapes, we change our peak rate of discharge and the time of concentration because we're getting more water through the system faster. So the culvert that goes underneath your driveway might have worked for 40 years, and now all of a sudden, because new roads are put in, more houses are put up, there's more water coming to that point at that given time. Okay? It's nothing you did incorrectly. It's things that are kind of beyond your control. So it's understanding the reasons why we have problems is important. Some of them are more solvable than others. But getting into some projects, one of my favorite things that I get to work on is the Westbrook Conservation Initiative. I'm sure many of you have been there. If you haven't and you have kids or grandkids, bring them there. It's a wonderful little park at the south end of Lake George. It's a stormwater wetland. This time of year, you're going to see turtles. Those are 11 or 12 different painted turtles sitting on a log that we threw in there. If anybody wants to get goodwill in a community and there is a pond, get a cedar log and anchor it in the pond, and you will have goodwill for the rest of your life from the community. It is amazing how many people love to see turtles sitting on the log sunning themselves. And it's a great feel-good thing, and it makes us feel good because the people enjoy it, their kids remember it, and it makes a memory. But this is functioning as a stormwater filtration system. Water's coming off of State Route 9 in Lake George as we're heading towards the village. This is Westbrook, and it flows through a circuitous path, depositing sediment primarily in the first pond, dropping it along the way. But then because we have almost a monoculture of cattails, which really wasn't intended, we have a significant uptake of nutrients as phosphorus, nitrogen, and at some point I'm going to assume heavy metals. I don't think Dr. Sutherland has looked into that, but it's functioning very well from the last reports. It's meeting and exceeding its standards and goals that were set for phosphorus and nitrogen. But going back to Phil's comment, doesn't do anything for salt. That's a management technique, right? It's not, can't retain it. It's a change in how we manage. So this all came about as a thought process in the early to mid 90s with Tom Jarrett and Jim Sutherland saying, hey, we have to do something. And this is from the National Urban Runoff Pollution Program. There were not many lakes that were initially in the program. I know Lake George was one, and I think Tahoe was one of them, and they expanded it through there. But basically, let me drop my glasses here. Runoff from developed areas account for 14% of the annual phosphorus loading to Lake George, which is 15.5% of the load to the South Lake, and 6.6 of the load to the North Lake. In addition, developed areas contribute 62.9% of the annual phosphorus load to the study area at the south end of the lake. Well, I think we can agree that the biggest impacts from stormwater in the lake are in the south end. So let's focus on some of these problematic areas. And if we're looking at what we can do through non-point source reduction, this is a great method to do it. It is truly a wonderful little wetland that we get to manage. Trinity Rock, this was a project that we partnered with the LGA, the town of Lake George. We got a grant from the Lake Champlain Basin program. I believe it was the Lake Champlain Basin program. I might be incorrect. It might have been the DEC. But there was a basically just an inlet with a pipe that went right down to the lake. This is up in the town of Lake George. Landowners were asking for assistance. The three groups partnered together. This just pass-through system was removed, and a hydrodynamic flow separator, and in this case it's called a CDS unit, continuous deflective separation, which is nothing more than if you have a Dyson vacuum cleaner, it's that tornado action. So as the water goes through, it's not being, there's no hydraulics as far as what's moving anything. This is all through how the water's entering. It spins around solids such as sand, some silts, other heavier materials ends up here. Then you have some debris going down. You'll have some garbage up top. You'll have oils and grease and things like that. Think of a septic tank, kind of a combination of that with the vacuum cleaner. That's what it looks like on the inside. That's what it looks like installed. And, where did the shrubs come from? So our office does planning, but we do a lot more. We actually planted them. It was one of my staff and I. We go over. There's 5 technical staff in our office. I'm the district manager, but I'm kind of a field manager, so I work a lot in the field too. So we actually go out and do the plantings. We did the seeding, we did the mulching, and it worked out really well. So we've actually been awarded a phase 2 section to this grant from the basin program, and we're working down below, and hopefully we'll remediate the rest of the issue in that area. Working again with the LGA on I-87 in New York State DOT. Removing a lot of macadam swales that carried stormwater directly into Lake George. So you're not doing anything with salt again, but we can reduce phosphorus, we can reduce nitrogen, we can reduce sediment, and we can reduce thermal fluctuations to the streams from this time of year into September, where macadam, the blacktop swales, are going to heat up to about 135, 140 degrees. That cold storm that comes through on July 17th is going to hit it. You have warm water going down into our cold water streams for trout. We're disconnecting that as much as possible. This was a very good project because it got our local DOT out of the same old, and actually the resident engineer at the time was very on board with it, but so was their staff. And when the staff's on board with it, you can do a lot. So we seeded, mulched, used erosion sediment control blankets, used wildflower seed in some areas, and it's held up very well. It needs maintenance. And the only area that we had a problem was as you're coming southbound from Warrensburg, the exit 22 off ramp. But that was as a result of the October 31st, 2019 storm that we had. And they got about 5 inches of rain there and things backed up. But you know what? They're DOT. They fixed it. We can get on with it. Our office also has funding to go out now to do outfall inspections and sampling. So in our county, we'll go around using this unit here. It's called a YSI meter, and it evaluates different types of parameters, dissolved oxygen, pH. I believe, I'm not going to try to make it up. I'm not smart enough anymore. That's why I have a staff. So they go out and they take it. This is one of the staff, Jake. Looking at taking the same parameters we use in the urbanized areas and saying, hey, here's what we have. Is it flowing? Is it not flowing? If it's flowing, let's do a quick analysis of it. If the analysis shows that it might be problematic, then the next step would be to take a sample and have it sent to a lab for further analysis, and then provide it back to the town of Bolton, town of Lake George, town of Hague, for any type of follow-up. We also worked with the LGA on putting together a grant for the Pioneer Village up in Bolton. So soil and water districts can work on private property. That's how we were set up. I am government, but I am here to help. And what we can do is, provide assistance on planning projects, on implementation projects, and I do site visits all the time. My role has kind of shifted a lot more towards forestry work, but we deal with a lot of different things. We even dealt with rattlesnakes before, which was a really odd one, but we did. So Pioneer Village had taken the initiative to do some proper best management practices on a steep slope. They did a good job, but they needed some additional inputs. So working with the LGA said that they would put in an application to the basin program for funding for a planning project. Pioneer Village is not unlike many other areas around Lake George. High density, older homes, limited space to do work for improvements. So right now, that grant is, have you actually gotten a contract for it yet? Okay. Yeah, that's the other problem. We're in the same boat on many things, but it's in the mail, I'm sure. So we're moving forward on that and look forward to working on that. And when we're looking at stormwater, what are we concerned with in our office? We're looking at the soil because most people don't understand what soil is. There's 455 different soil types in New York State. And some of them have more clay, some have more silt, some have more sand, some don't have one or the other. But soil is not just, dirt. It's sand, silt, and clay particles. You have air or pore spaces. There's a certain level of water called field capacity and organic matter. And what I have living in the town of Thurman is completely different than what's here, than what's different in Glens Falls. But here's up in the town of Bolton. This was a cross section that was dug out that I took a picture of, and you can see the gradation as you have the humus layer, you have the organic layer, you have all that decaying, you have getting down towards the parent material. So it's very important to know what the soils are. So at your house, what can you do? Consider green infrastructure, something I'm totally on board with. I love green infrastructure because it's so straightforward and simple. Don't look at it as a one-off. It's a longevity. This is small battles. Winning the small battle is important, but you want to also have a project that you can maintain and understand you can't always get what you want. So you have to be practical with it. See the color of this water? It's kind of aquamarine green. That's one of our interns a number of years ago. That's because someone, and this was not in the Lake George watershed, it was down in Queensbury. They had a pond that had algae in it. And they, you could get the aqua shield. It's a tint, nothing more than a tint. But when it's applied to reduce the amount of algae in there, it's considered an herbicide. Well, there's a time and a place to apply it. The gentleman put it at the outlet of their pond after a 3-inch rainstorm, and it flowed right out. And we found it while we were doing our stormwater work. That contacted the town. Town had a follow-up. It was an education type of thing. The guy wanted he wanted a clean pond. I understand, but you have to be smart about it. You can't just dump it in and cross your finger and say it's going to work. So a typical cross section of something that a lot of us see. This is, a biofiltration system. It's a rain garden. Simple concept. I don't even like to say polluted water because, being a kid of the 70s, I grew up with the Saturday morning cartoons and the images of the smokestacks, the images of the garbage washing up on the commercials. Fortunately, Scooby-Doo would come on, so it made me happy again. But, for the most part, I would take stormwater over wastewater, dealing with it. But you have this stormwater runoff. It's coming into an area that it will be detained or retained, allowed to infiltrate or evaporate. The plants are going to take up nutrients that are in there, so your phosphorus and nitrogen. The soil bacteria is very incredible. It can break down virtually anything. It's going to help lock up some of that nutrient level, some of the heavy metals even. It'll start breaking items down, and then it's filtering through. It's not very different if any of you have been out of the country and used a Berkey water system. It goes through. And it just clarifies itself. And if it has to because of volume, because remember that peak rate of discharge, the time of concentration is altered, then it can go into bypass. And around here, most of the time it would go into bypass into a little rock line ditch or a green grass swale and be on its merry way. So it's very simple to do something like that. I like to practice what I preach. I did it from my house again, and I live in the middle of nowhere in Thurman, but I did it. So develop a plan that meets your needs and what you are willing to maintain. If you can't maintain it, if you're not willing to maintain it, don't even consider it. Hire a reputable contractor. Simple projects are not necessarily easy. So many people, I can do that. No, you can't. Okay. And that's why there are professionals, and look for someone who has experience. Look for someone who has the ability to make alterations as necessary, and generally look for people with equipment. Whenever you create a soil disturbance, stabilize it as soon as possible. That's one of the biggest things. Actually, if you can keep soil in place on the ground, you have prevented a problem. It's not that you've stopped a problem. You've just prevented it. So keep your soil in place. Seed it, mulch it, cover it, lock it up, and maintain afterwards. Before starting a project, get a soils analysis conducted. Very important. You can ask our office, we can step you through it, or simply call your local cooperative extension. It's very simple to do. It's about $17. It's going to give you recommendations for soil health, soil improvements. Consider organic alternatives in composting leaves and grass clippings. However, just because it's all natural doesn't mean it's always good for you. Look at lead and arsenic. So make sure you don't over apply anything. Make sure you apply it at the correct time. You put a bunch of compost down and it washes right off that side hill into the lake. It may not be as bad as some of the manufactured items that we put down, but that doesn't mean it's great. It's less bad. All right. Mow at a higher setting. I do that. I don't mow on the highest setting. I mow on one of the higher settings. I keep it a little lower just because of ticks. All right. We a little bit mowed is, in my mind, a little better. Also, if you have chickens, we have chickens. Our tick population's reduced. I do not believe that chickens focus ticks after ticks. I believe they destroy all the habitat that the ticks live in, and that's the key. Remove small sections of lawn for native plantings. We have a native pollinator program you can sign up for if you want to move from 100 to 500 square feet of turf grass, and we'll give you the wildflower seed. Minimize herbicides, pesticides, and along waters and in wetlands, create or conserve buffers. Now, last thing I'll close with is, this may have nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but Chris has seen enough of my presentations to know that I go in whatever direction I really want to. So in my world, this gentleman is Jerry Apps. He's a professor emeritus from University of Wisconsin-Madison. And he had a great quote. And because we had to convert this to a PDF, I have to take my glasses off and read this. But thank you, Lindsay, for getting it for me. I appreciate it. So Professor Apps said, I finally realized that my roots were in the land, and no matter what I said or what I did, I could not deny this. Who I am today originates from the home farm, from my neighbors, dusty roads, country schools, small towns, and especially the land. The land is a powerful teacher. The land taught me patience. It produces a crop in its time, not according to my schedule. The land taught me wonder. The surprise that comes from planting a tiny seed and seeing it grow in one summer into a corn plant 7 feet tall. The land taught me respect, to not abuse it by plowing up and down the hills or planting huge fields that the wind can sweep across, causing soil and crops to wash or blow away. And perhaps, most importantly, the land taught me to never forget that we are but visitors, temporary stewards, and what we do on the land will dramatically affect those who follow. Caring for the land is one way to care for the future. those ideas and ideals can be applied to everything that we do here. And it doesn't matter what you do. If you want to put a lawn in, I have no problem with that. If you want to plant trees, I have no problem with that. And really, if you're doing it on your own property, what business of it is of mine? But if we can provide a message of conservation, that's the important thing, the overall goal. What can we do better? My mom always said, everything in moderation. And that's what I kind of go by. I look for reasonableness. That's how I try to approach our office. I have a wonderful staff. If you're in Warren County, we can come out and do a site visit if you have any questions. We partner with the LGA. And I had my 1-minute warning. Thank you. That was actually the best stuff I've ever seen, because usually I stand back there and go like that. So I like the Vanna cards. So, and I'll turn it over to Monika.
All right, thank you so much, Jim. I'm Monika, the Managing Program Director of the Lake George Association, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the LGA programs that we have involving stormwater. So we actually have about 16 active stormwater projects happening, and some of them are involving water quality monitoring and research. So the goal here is to study these streams that enter Lake George and see how impacted or polluted they are, see what's happening in them, and then take that data and be able to then advocate for mitigation projects. So Fairy Brook was actually brought to us by a concerned citizen, and so we've been studying that, and we're going to do a watershed assessment for Fairy Brook for the sub-watershed, and then take that data and then be able to determine what projects we need to do to help that stream out. And Jim had mentioned Westbrook, and so we're currently studying and just sampling and monitoring Westbrook just to make sure that everything that was installed there is doing what it's supposed to be doing. The LGA also has a lot of land use programs, one of them being our low impact development certification program. So it's similar conceptually to LEED, except for instead of like green living and solar and that type of thing, it's, your impact on the environment and with development. So that's a great program. We're looking to get that put into different town codes so that there's tax incentives if you get LEED certified. Right now, we're written into the Lake George town code, but there's no tax incentive. So stay tuned. We're still working on that. We also partner heavily with municipalities and homeowners associations. Jim mentioned a bunch of those projects. And this year, we're really excited to work with the Pioneer Village on their stormwater issues. So hopefully everyone has heard this by now, but we have a lake protector app that we're very proud of. If you're a homeowner, you can input your property into the app, and it will tell you everything you need to know about your property's regards to the environmental impact that you'll have. So it will tell you about slopes, streams, soils, everything. And then based on the data for your property, it will output recommendations of things that you can do to have a better environmental impact. And if you get to that point and you actually want some even more customized solutions, we also provide site visits as well. Jim had mentioned that they do too, so you have lots of resources, but we'll send a staff member out to your site to chat with you about the issues that you're experiencing and, provide some suggestions on things you can do. The Waterkeeper is also very involved with construction in the watershed. Thank you so much, Chris. Chris attends all of the planning and zoning meetings in every municipality around the state, every single one. And he's there to make sure that all of the code and law that is in place to protect the environment is being adhered to with these projects, and then also to provide suggestions. The LGA also has a lot of stormwater related community science programs. So CSLAP is a New York State program, and that is water sampling. There's a ton of lakes in the Adirondacks that are involved. It's basically just taking water samples, you send them to the state, and then those are analyzed. And then at the end of the year, the state will provide an analysis of it. So if you actually go on the CSLAP website, you can look up any lake that is involved in this program, and it's a whole analysis of the water quality. It's really, really cool. WAVE is another DEC program, but this one is regarding streams. So if you have kids, this is a really good one too, to go kick around in streams. We're looking for samples of macroinvertebrates in these streams, and then those get sent into, oops, it's supposed to be on this side. Those get sent down to the state in these little tubes that you see here. And the reason macroinvertebrates are important is because some are very pollution sensitive and others aren't. So the ones that you find in the stream is a really good initial indicator of how polluted or impacted that stream could be. And then the state analyzes it at a deeper level. The MS4 program is a partner with Lake George, and there's a bunch of different parts to this, but the LGA works on the education side of it. And the main thing here is the storm drain markers that you see in the village. A lot of other cities have them too. And Lake George Environmental Club, I believe it was, just helped us with this year. They mapped out where all the markers were and where they needed to go, and then went and installed them. So that was really great. And our last program here is the Lake George Cleanup Day. Last year was our first one, and we're having another one this year, September 15th. It was such a success. We had over 100 people meet us in the village to clean up down there. You also don't have to come to the village. You can just clean up wherever you want. You can clean up on your property and your water, whatever you want to do, but please join us for that. The LGA also thinks it's super important to invest in these programs and things that we are telling people that they need to get done, because without the money, nothing's going to happen. So Jim spoke about Westbrook and I-87. So we've invested heavily into those programs. Something else that's really fun that I wanted to mention is this porous pavement vacuum. So if you install porous pavement, the reason that the water can permeate through is because there's a lot of gaps in it, right? But over time, because those gaps are there, it can fill with dirt and soil and things, which clogs it up. So then it can't permeate, the water can't permeate. So you actually need to vacuum it out every now and then, which is really interesting. So we helped purchase this for the town, and I believe all the local towns share it. And lastly, this will be mentioned a little bit later, but we have a lake impact fund that we're very excited to announce. We're going to have money for stormwater projects as well as septic projects. So for stormwater, grants are going to be up to $2,500. They're going to require a homeowner match and also require some financial need. And so those last two stipulations are also going to go for the septic program. And Chris will talk a little bit about that. But this program has not been launched yet. We're still working on the application process, so stay tuned. If you want to be the first to know about when this goes live, please sign up for our newsletter, because we will be announcing it there. And after, if you have any questions about any of our LGA grant programs, please come speak to me. So what can you do regarding stormwater? Jim spoke a little bit about what you can do more in a context of like a project that you're working on, but outside of that, what can you do? Obviously, if you have something, a project that you want to get done, apply for an LGA grant and we'll help you fund it. Volunteer for any of our great community science programs. If you have a project that you're going to have to submit plans to your town for, work with the waterkeeper first. Don't wait until it goes to the meeting and they're discussing it there. If you contact us in advance, Chris can work with you right off the bat and making sure that you're having the least impact with this project on the lake as possible. And then when you get to that approval process, Chris has already seen it and approved it, and everything will go really smoothly and the lake will be very happy. You can also get LID certified and request a site visit, as I had mentioned. So in order to do that, you can sign up for the Lake Protector app, and there's actually a little tab on the side where you can fill out a form to request that visit. And lastly, advocate and educate within your social circles. So thank you all so much for coming out. We have some people online, which is so exciting, but there's only so many people we can communicate directly with. So we really rely on our lake protectors to take the information that they've learned and spread that to other people within your groups that we might not be able to connect with. So with that, we'll take some questions.
Yeah. First one, Jim, you're up. Back to you, which is, how often does the hydraulic separator have to be cleaned, and is it easy to do that?
Yes, if you have the right equipment, which fortunately I believe all the communities around the lake have or have access to. It's not anything that's really different than almost what they would use to clean out a septic system. Town of Queensbury actually just purchased a brand new one. Their old one was about 25 years old, and every time they took it out, a part fell off, so they had to invest in it. Not cheap. This thing is, I think about $500,000. Yeah, so that's the whole thing. You can throw in every kind of project that you want, but that's why I was saying, either at your level or a municipal level, you have to be able to maintain it. And we like to put things in the ground, under the ground, on top of the ground, and say, hey, we're done. The Ron Popeil set it and forget it. And no, maintenance is critical, and things are used, and there's a certain lifespan. So, yes, there's the ability to get that cleaned out. It's kind of a monitoring thing. So, generally, what you would do is clean it out in the spring to remove the material from winter, fall that has gotten into there. And then you do a quick inspection and, if necessary, a early fall clean out. But I've helped the town of Queensbury clean one out. If you know where the Enterprise Rent-A-Car across from Price Chopper is on Route 9, there's a big system in there, different than what I showed you. But yeah, the vacuum truck comes back, they back up, open it up. It looks like an elephant trunk. It gets dropped down in there. There's actually a bag that they push up into the inlet channel. They inflate remotely, so it blocks it, creates a weir. The system goes into bypass for that period of time. Then you have to put a water pump in there, draw the water down, discharge it appropriately so it's not just going right into the stream, and then remove it much like a septic system maintenance program. So that's basically what it is. That's one of those that I said, very simple, but not necessarily easy. So it's a stepped process, but it's not anything a highway department can't handle.
Perfect. All right, we'll do one more question. In analyzing phosphorus levels, can you separate natural sources like tree leaves versus other sources?
They have, yeah, I'm not a research scientist. I usually I look at the people who are here and I joke around. I'm like, I am certainly the Joey Bag of Donuts of this presentation this morning. But I would defer to Chris, or perhaps Monica has information on that. I have seen breakdowns of, this much phosphorus is coming from the urbanized area, this much from this. And I think generally I almost think it's like 2 to 3% natural deposition. And again, you have deposition out there right now, and we had the pollening 2 weeks ago. You have all that pollen. What's that? And you have these minute particles adhering to whatever's getting onto the ground and then flowing down somewhere. And so it can have an impact, and that impact is going to be exacerbated if we continue to see the type of events that we have the warming, we have the intensity of rains. You're just going to have more and more items flushed down. And when you get into that cycle, it's hard to break that cycle because it's the chicken and the egg. We're feeding it, and then we're extracting it, and it's feeding up here, and then it's going back down there. And, so we have to deal with it. So I guess that plays into the other role that I have for soil and water. I'm the hazard mitigation coordinator for the county. So I get to deal with post damage impacts, but working with communities like, hey, what can we do to make you more resilient? If you've heard of that term, what can we do? Culverts, other sustainable projects. So it's all tied together. But yeah, I would talk to Chris or maybe Phil or Monica.
Thank you so much.